Hello, 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 everybody. So let's get Becky on. Let's see if we can get Becky on. So the invitation has been sent. Please post comments and questions below. All right, so we are waiting for Becky. She should be here soon. And I'm really excited for this story. It's going to be really good. So she should be joining us here shortly. Just a reminder to everyone, we are launching the book. It is exciting, November 21st. So I'll put in the comments where you can pre-order your copy. We've had some really exciting stories, and we appreciate all of you following along. And it was really cool that I just spoke at Palm Harbor University High School, and I was talking to some of the students there, and I mentioned that this book, and it's interesting to know how many of these kids either are they are children of an independent parent or an independent mom, or they have friends that are, and I knew there was a large population, but the more I talk about it, the more I think hear people's stories, the more I'm so excited that I decided to choose this topic. And I was talking with my wife about this, all the different topics for different books, and weight loss, stories of change, stories of mentors. And I know it's funny because it's like independent moms, it's like I'm not a strong independent single mom at all, and nor am I a son of a strong independent single mom, but it's just one of those groups of individuals that are just I see the byproduct. I see the children of these women, and I was like, I gotta highlight these women. And what's cool about Becky is Becky created an entire community of strong independent single moms and those that struggle with grief or depression or anxiety, and she just has a whole community of these ladies, and I'm excited for her to share her story. And she also has a podcast where she interviews and talks a lot about this, and her podcast is called Sucker Punched, and you can check that out. I'll put that also in the comments. So as we are patiently waiting for Miss Becky, oh, I see she sent me a message. She says she's getting ready now. So she says, ready when you are, and I am ready. So the invitation has been sent. So we are just waiting for her to join in on this Facebook Live, and we'll be good to go. Alright, Alright, patiently waiting. We'll get there. Love you, Alright, so I'm sure she'll hop on here shortly. So as I was mentioning, Becky has a podcast called Sucker Punched. She also has a blog, and her blog is beckylmccoy.com. And what I'm really excited about this story is that Becky is, some of the previous stories and other stories in the book are about some sort of breakup or abuse or abusive relationship, someone leaving. But this is a little bit different. She's a widow, and I'm really excited for her to hear this story. She's saying, there we go, bang, that is getting. Let's go. All right, it says inviting and connecting. Yay, there you are.
Hey, it finally works.
You made it. So I know you're streaming live from beautiful sunny Connecticut. Is that right?
Yeah, it was pouring rain today. So.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I was actually just up in Buffalo, and I couldn't wait to leave. So I am so excited to officially meet you and continue our conversation over actual real time, and I know so much about you because I read your story, and
Right.
I was just telling everyone that's listening in about your podcast, Sucker Punched, along with
Mm-hmm.
your blog and your community that you run. Why don't you tell us a little bit about? I know from what I read in the story, but why don't you tell us a little bit about this Sucker Punched? I know it's a really intriguing title for a podcast. I'm curious what that was. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's super fun. Which is of course not what you think of when you hear that a podcast is called Sucker Punch. But it's about those times in life when you just kind of feel sucker punched. Like the really hard stuff just comes from out of nowhere and catches you off guard, and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants and have to figure it out as you go along. And so I invite people to come on the show. Sorry, my like background. The one thing I hate about this background is that like sometimes it's not parallel. Um, so people come on the show and we chat about, you know, this one moment in their life, and just kind of how they chose to handle it and how they're living more bravely now because of it. And it's been such an honor to help people tell their stories.
Love that. Is there a specific audience that you target for those stories?
Not really. Just kind of wanting to, I mean, I have mostly women who like come on the podcast and who listen to the podcast, but it's certainly not like a podcast for women kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just kind of people of all ages from with all these different kinds of struggles. It's not just like the loss of a loved one, but maybe chronic illness, or I just did a whole series on mental illness, and we've talked about like losing jobs or going through bankruptcy, just all these different things and how situations might be different, but the emotions and the experience can be really similar.
And it's true. I mean, everyone has a story. Everyone has some sort of struggle or something they overcame. So it's really beautiful that you created a space and a platform for individuals to kind of talk through some of those challenges, and also offer some wisdom to, you know, those that are just maybe walking up to their fire right now and haven't walked through it yet. And maybe they're a little fearful, and just hearing that there is a light at the end of that fire.
Yeah, and I get all the time, well, like, I haven't been through anything as difficult as you, like every people comparing their hard stuff to my hard stuff. And I feel like this podcast is really kind of starting to break open that, like, hey, you know what? We all have our own hard stuff, and that's enough. We don't need to compare.
Yeah.
It's not a game. Like, there are no winners.
It's not a competition, because each of us have a different capacity. You know, what our capacity is. Like, if I'm at a level 10 capacity and level 4 hard, but if somebody else is at a level 15 capacity and it's a level, 2 hard or 7 hard, it's just, we have a different capacity and a different scoring and grading. And I agree. It's not a competition. It's just, we've all been through different things, and, we want to help as many people as possible. So I love that you have that community. And I love that your story is unique in the sense that I kind of started by already talking about this before you came on, and it's going to be on the recording. But the other stories, several of them had to do with a man that had the kid and then was either abusive, or that left, or wasn't there. But your story, your story is unique to the others because you are a widow. Is that correct? So I'm really intrigued to hear this side of the story, because this was circumstantial in the sense that it was not by your choice. The other women I talked to, it was their choosing. I'm leaving and I'm going to be an independent single mom, and I'm going to do it on my own by choice. But yours was not that case. It was by circumstance. So I'd like to start with that about, I know Keith, had passed on. If I remember correctly, I have the story in front of me just to refresh my memory. But your 2-year-old, is that right? So
So he passed away January 5th of 2015. So almost 3 years ago now. My son had just turned 2 in October, and I was about 8 months pregnant when my husband died. So it was kind of this like lifetime movie set of circumstances. Like, could not have, or would not have certainly planned it out this way. Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Mm. So if we had to kind of rewind a little bit, so you already have a 2-year-old, you're pregnant
Yep.
with an 8-month-old. How do you prepare? How did you prepare the 2-year-old? I guess I mean I don't have a 2-year-old yet, but um, is there comprehension at the point where it's like you have to sit them down and have that talk that, hey, you know, we're going to do this together without daddy at this moment, or how does that go about?
Yeah, my little guy, he's in kindergarten now, and he is very emotionally mature and like very perceptive to situations, and like has a really good, like an honest grasp of what's going on in life. But we didn't really say anything to him other than daddy's sick.
Mm.
Because Keith had he had a terminal diagnosis, so we knew, and it was really, really aggressive. So we knew that he wasn't going to live for very long after he was diagnosed. But we just kind of said, hey, you know what, daddy's not feeling well. We were going to take him to the doctor, and he was just like, okay, cool, because every time daddy goes to the doctor, I get to have a sleepover at my friend's house. Like, it was life as normal for him. And I remember the day that Keith died, my mother-in-law and Caleb and I were in the car driving home from the hospital. And we had to drive past the hospital to get on the highway to go home, from where Caleb had been staying. And he just said, hey, look, daddy's hospital. And my mom and I were just like crushed because we hadn't talked through how to tell him. We hadn't really I mean, we were still processing it by ourselves. It went so quickly. I mean, from the moment he was diagnosed till he died was less than 3 months.
Wow.
And even once he was in the hospital, he just deteriorated so quickly that we couldn't even keep up. And so I just kind of took a deep breath and I was like, well, buddy, he's in heaven now with Grandpa Mike, my dad, who had passed away the day after Caleb was born. And I just kind of like left it at that and was like, he is only 2, so his understanding cannot be very complex. So it got really quiet in the back seat. And then all of a sudden we just hear, oh, Mom, look, a crane. And he was like out the other window and like had totally moved on already. Wow. So because he's so young, it's been a lot of really gradual conversations. Like now that he's in school, he's like, hey, Mom, wait, why do all the other kids have dads? Like, even if kids in his class have divorced parents, his friends still have their dad.
Yeah. So if there's a mom that's listening to this who's going through or has experienced that, how does that conversation go with your son? And what's the explanation like?
Yeah, well, I just tell him like daddy was really sick, and God chose to heal his body by taking him to heaven. But then I have to qualify, like he didn't have a cold and then he died, because I don't want him to be terrified that anytime he gets sick or I get sick or I'm sick that they're gonna die. But that, like, there's this different kind of sickness that's really, really bad, and a lot of times you can die from it. And right now that's just kind of enough for him. And my pediatrician has said that probably in the next year or so, that's not going to be enough anymore, and he's going to start to get really angry. But we're just kind of like get there when we get there, and take it one step.
Yeah, that's that's a great point. That if you what you just made, that if you say, oh, you get sick and then you go to heaven, it's like, well, there's an association there that you don't want a kid to think.
Right.
So yeah, that's a great point. I wouldn't think of that. So I wrote that down for myself. I'm like, wow, what not to say. So
right. Well, and so my mom lost her mom when I was 3, and her dad when I was 9. So I've kind of been dealing with this whole grief thing my whole life. And I think especially having lost my own dad 5 years ago now, it's just kind of put me in a place to think about those kinds of things more often than people usually do, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is at this point. It's just one of those skill sets I've developed.
So now so now if we move past, Keith passes, and you have your 2-year-old, you're pregnant with the 8-month-old, so then you have your daughter, you said.
Yep.
So now you have your daughter. um I read in your story the community came and kind of helped out. Now, I can't say many, I don't want to use like loose terms, but I think there's got to be at least somebody who hears this or listens to this or experiences this that says, I don't want help from people, or I don't want charity, or
Yeah.
um, how do you find a line from, I'm going through this grieving process, I want to be strong, but I don't want to accept charity, like,
Right.
how did that conversation go with yourself?
I don't even think I had the energy to think that hard about it. When you're 8 months pregnant and have a 2-year-old, you're exhausted. When you've just been the caregiver for someone who's ill, you're exhausted. When you're doing all those things at the same time, like, there's just no clarity of thought. So when we got home, before we had left the hospital when he died, I had texted a couple of friends and said, hey, I need all the air mattresses you can find. Just, I don't know who's coming into town. I don't know what we're going to need, but just like, can you just bring a whole bunch of stuff over to my house and whatever? So we get home and people had dropped off air mattresses. My neighbors had all, like, I hadn't talked to any of them, but they had all brought over like 2 weeks worth of food. I had called my close friend and just said, like, can you just show up at my house with Chick-fil-A chocolate chip cookies and Dr. Pepper? Like, that's all I can think about right now. And like, that would make me so happy. And like, Brenda walks in with like 2 boxes of 24, canned Dr. Pepper and a huge, like, a dozen Chick-fil-A chocolate chip cookies. And, that was really helpful, and just people helping, like, with the kids. I did know that I was so emotionally drained that I needed somebody in the house with me, that I could not be pregnant, be grieving, and take care of a 2-year-old all at the same time. Like, I just needed to be able to shut down and not be the responsible person for a little while. So I think it was about 2 months, maybe a month and a half, but close to 2 months, where there was another adult in the house with me 24 hours a day. People would come in from out of town and stay for a night or 2 nights or 5 nights or whatever. Because I still had to go to my doctor's appointments. Like, I had to go have a baby. Like,
Yeah.
There were all these other things that had to happen. And I just knew that it was so far beyond me being able to do it that I had to ask for help. I had a harder time, like, when people offered to pay for a cleaning lady. And so it was just kind of like, oh, but I should be able to do that. Like, that's not that hard. It's not hard to clean your house, right? Like, it might take some time, and now it might take me a little longer, but I should be able to do that. But then it became clear, like, no, I can't do that. And no, I can't cook. And no, I can't, because I'm just so mentally exhausted and emotionally exhausted that I need to just be able to go take like 2 naps a day and not have to worry about any of those other things. And so when I allowed people to help in those ways, I really started to understand how much time I needed to take care of myself, and that I was never going to reach the point of being able to parent my children well if I wasn't taking that time to take care of myself. Yeah. So about 5 or 6 months after Keith died, we were in the DC area. We moved back up to Connecticut because my mom is here. My in-laws are here, siblings are here. And so I knew that there was going to be more help. And I kind of went through the same thing again. Like, we downsized, like, in a huge way to a smaller house. I should be able to clean this house. And like a year later, like, okay, I'm not cleaning the house. Like, it's just not getting done. So I need to delegate somehow, because it's just, otherwise it's not going to happen. So just kind of like looking at those things in life that just aren't happening. And then it doesn't become charity. It becomes like, I cannot do it. I'm not getting it done. So if I want it to get done, I need to hand it out to somebody. I need somebody to pay somebody to do it. I need to find a friend who it. You know, I've had people that are like, can I please come organize your linen closet? I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like, sure. You
Why
know,
not?
I mean, I like to be organized and I have all our toy bins labeled and everything, but I don't have the energy at the end of the day to resort toys. Like, I'm not going to be spending my time doing that, but my babysitter loves doing stuff like that. So if it's nap time or, you know, she's put the kids to bed, she'll go reorganize all my toys because she loves it.
Well, good for her.
So yeah, right. um, so it's just been this learning curve of like, it's not weakness if I can't do it all. Like, seriously, I'm only one person.
Now, this
So
might be a silly question. I'm going to ask it just in case anybody else is thinking it. If I just think about human nature, you know, humans are addicted to habits. We get kind of stuck in these rituals, these habits, these patterns, these behaviors. And was there a point in time where you felt like there was like a depression coming on? Because I think that if someone puts themselves in a position where, you know, they just had a child, they also just buried their husband, they also have a 2-year-old to take care of, they don't feel like doing anything at all, and 6 months go by or 5 months go by or 2 months go by, or X amount of time goes by, but we get in this routine or dependency. It's almost human tendency just to kind of slip into this lull, depressed state. And I don't know if that did that come about? Like, was there a point where you felt like, all right, I could slip to depression, but instead I'm going to move towards this positive person that starts a podcast and starts helping other people,
yeah.
you know?
It's a little bit tricky to answer that question because I do struggle with anxiety and depression like normally. So like, yes, I've gone into a couple really bad seasons of depression since Keith died. Part of that just being my brain chemistry, part of that being the situation. And it's really sneaky because I don't realize that I'm slipping into depression until I'm in the really dark place. And so it's been interesting kind of picking up on that. But then, you know, there's the part of grief where like it's okay to be down and it's okay to be really sad, and there has been this like really tremendous change in life. And there's nothing wrong with like sitting in that for a while. And you know, because like I'm always encouraging people, you have to grieve at some point. So if you don't want to grieve now, that's fine, but it's going to chase you down and it's going to get bigger. And like, you're going to have to deal with it at some point. And I think because I had lost my dad 3 years earlier, I had really struggled with that. Like, that was really hard for me. I was really depressed for a long time because I just didn't know how to deal with grief and how my anxiety and depression were going to like figure into that. And so I kind of already had some practice. So I knew, and I think that's part of why I knew like I needed to set up having other adults around. I knew that I needed to do certain things to kind of keep an eye on me and help me kind of realize like, okay, today's been a bad day, but tomorrow can be better. Like, that doesn't terrible. And I used like a lot of my grief processing was through writing. When my dad died, I just started writing down everything I was processing through, and people really started to resonate with that and be like, hey, wait a second, that's how I felt when I lost my aunt, or, you know, when I didn't have a job for those 6 months or whatever. So I kept writing. And then when Keith died, it was just kind of this moment of like, just be raw and just throw your rawness out on the table because other people need to see an example of that. So, you know, it wasn't so much like, now I'm going to start a podcast. Like, it was kind of like, I'm just going to keep writing because it's really healing for me. And it really seems to help other people. And then it just kind of evolved into like, wow, this is really resonating with people. How can we get more stories out there? And then it kind of turns into a project from there.
And if you had to tell somebody, say you have a mom who's dealing with this, maybe she's a widow, you know, maybe she has a kid or two. Um, is from a I guess from a financial standpoint, like to be able to raise a family, to still kind of cope with everything. What advice
Mm-hmm.
do you give them? Because it still seems like you're pursuing your passion with writing, with helping people. You're still you're it seems like there's a I just think if someone hears the story and they're thinking, wow, she had all of this, but how the heck did she put food on the table? You know, like, or how do I put food on the table? Like, I love what she's telling me of asking people for help and everything. If they were in a situation where, um, you know, maybe they still had to work, or they had a, how does that unfold? I don't know if maybe I'm not asking the question the right way, but I just think
Yeah,
someone might be
it's
curious.
it's really, you can't make the decisions based on like what your ideal is or what you want your life to be like in 6 months or in a year or in 5 years. But at least for the first couple of years, you just have to decide. Hold on, I have a little visitor. Leave it alone, okay? Um, you just have to decide that you're going to do the right thing for right now. Like, do the next right thing, and that's all you can do. Like in my situation, financially, we had planned for a lot of life insurance because my husband had had lymphoma before we had been married. And so we just said, you know what, on the off chance that this ever happens again, like, let's just make sure that we have quite a bit of life insurance. And I'm always telling people that. When, like, I have a friend the other day was saying, you know, I'm due with my first baby soon. Should we just stick with the minimum life insurance that the military gives you, or should we get another policy? And like, get the other policy, because now there's this cushion of like, I don't have to like get a full-time job right away
Yeah.
to put on the table, right? Like, I have time to, as you know, as I'm processing through, I can figure out what I can handle and what I can't handle, um, and decide what's the best thing right now for my family. What, buddy? Yeah, I hear that. Can you find out what he's eating? The dog found some kind of snack.
Oh
I
boy,
don't know.
you'll find out. You'll find out probably tonight or tomorrow.
That's right.
uh, and I really appreciate you sharing that, by the way, because you know, being over prepared is sometimes tough, because we don't want to think the worst. So because essentially that's going to happen. It's like, well, by taking out this extra life insurance, you know, policy, essentially we're saying, well, you know, the inevitable is going to happen, but over preparing is not necessarily a negative thing. It's not like put it into the universe, well, hey, you're going to die. It's just like, hey, just
Right.
in case.
No, not at all. And for us, it was like a very real possibility because he had been sick before.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we had kind of been faced with that option. But it, you know, he talked a lot about when he was sick, like, I really want you guys to be taken care of.
Yeah.
I know, like, this is going to be so much harder for you guys because you have to figure out how to keep living.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I want, you know, I just want to know that you're going to be okay. And it's kind of really cool that, like, we are, because of the forethought and planning.
Yeah.
And like, even though he's not here, there, that's a huge gift
Yeah.
that he gave us to, you know, not, for me not to have to go to work right away and put the kids in daycare. And I know that that's a very real situation for most single moms, whether divorced or widowed, because especially a lot of other military widows, when their husband dies, they live far away from home, they don't have a community, and they either have to go back to work right away or they have to move home and find a job. And you know, so I really recognize that um, I have been, I hate to use the word like blessed, because a lot of people use that in like a really silly, like, oh, I got the new car I wanted, you know, like, this is like a much more like visceral, like, not life and death, but sort of like, you know, this is like my family. And um we are very cared for in a lot of ways that aren't like physical, like to do with our like food or house, or I mean we have all of those things and that's wonderful, but because we had prepared and we had paid off debt and we had done all these things, we have this like foundation where I'm not as stressed as most women in my situation are, and that's something that I think about a lot and I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, that's great. And that's such a great explanation because um, I think being able to receive is what I get from that. It's like being willing and able to receive and set the ego aside and saying, you know what, right now I need to focus on me. I got to be present, and it's okay letting go of control.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's tough to do, especially as the two baby cubs, and it's like we want to
Yeah.
control a lot, and to say, you know what, I gotta let go of being in control. I gotta put the ego aside. I got to just be right now, and I love that.
Yeah.
Being willing.
And that's not easy. Like,
Oh no,
let
I
me just
believe it.
that's probably the hardest thing. Like, my son, we found out today, has a cavity, and I almost broke down in the dentist's office because we have not been consistent about brushing and flossing teeth over the last 3 years because my brain just does not have the capacity to remember to do that on a regular basis. And there's just kind of this fear that because I'm the only adult and I'm the most responsible one in the family, if anything goes wrong or anything happens to my kids or they get sick, it's my fault.
Mm.
And I know that I couldn't have done things differently because I couldn't have had more capacity. Like, there's no way that life could be different in these same circumstances.
Yeah.
But it's still something that I really wrestle with, or just kind of feeling guilty that they're missing out on having a dad, that there are all these things and none of them are my fault, but I really wish I could fix it. And it's really easy to start to feel guilty about that.
Mm. Well, that's. I mean, this is. It's only been. I guess this will be 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's still. It's still fairly new, and
Yep.
I know some people are able to accept things and move on fast, and sometimes not so much. And I can only imagine. I mean, you have to be patient. I love that you are immersing yourself into helping other people through their you could call them struggles or circumstances or situations while you're going through yours. And I think that's just so courageous. And I know there are people listening and people that are going to read your story and say, wow, you know, dealing with the death of a parent and then a husband while raising kids and having essentially put life on hold. I mean, you were a teacher, right? Teaching physics.
Yeah, before I had kids, I taught high school and left teaching to be able to stay home. But then, as I started writing more and more, just like, hey, wait a minute, like this whole writing and speaking and community building thing, like this uses all of my strengths way more than teaching high school ever did. And, there are so many things about myself that I mean, maybe I would have learned them by the time I was like 55 or 60, like if Keith had lived, if my dad had lived. But I've learned them in these last 3 to 5 years, and I've grown, and I'm just such a completely different person in really, really wonderful ways. Um, and those things never would have happened. And that doesn't mean it's easy, and that doesn't mean I'm glad that it happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, oh, I'm a better person. I'm glad my husband died. Of course I'm not. Like, that was not the plan.
But you could find the gift. You could still find the gift, and that's the most important part, because some people focus so much on the darkness that they don't ever get a chance to see the light because they're blinded by it. And there's always a gift, and that's a great one, because you're able to help other people through it. Maybe it's, I don't have the answers. I don't think anybody does, but if you ask a good question, you could get a good answer that helps you continue to move forward with your life. Because if not, I mean, if you don't live, then you're dead. So you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it's been really interesting that one of the most powerful things I can do is just say this is not easy. Because I think sometimes when we see people on social media or we see writers or whatnot, you just kind of see this curated version of their life, and it's easy to just expect that they have it all figured out and that it's easy and whatnot. And I am here to say, like, raising my hand, both hands, both feet, like this is really, really hard. And it's gonna be hard for a really long time. And there are days where I get nothing done and I'm kind of consumed by grief and like just feel the weight of it all on my shoulders. And I can't do much else except for just kind of weep.
And you give
But I
yourself
think
permission for those days, and
right.
say,
And I also think it's important for people to understand that like
yeah,
today might be great, tomorrow might be horrible. Like, and people, there's a meme that I really love and I can post it in the comments of the video later.
yeah,
That, there's the stages of grief and it's the U shape with the 15 different stages of grief or whatever. But then it shows, what real grief is like is a squiggle from here and then over here and then back to up here. And it's like all over the place and completely unpredictable and not linear. And I think giving people the freedom and the permission to let it be not linear, like people say like, well, I feel like I should have gotten over it by now, or I should be back to real life right now. Like, says who?
yeah.
There's no rule book. This is just kind of what it is, and we're all working at it at our own pace.
Love that. Love that. That's so rich because it's true. People need to stop comparing themselves to what would life have been without these circumstances. Well,
Yeah.
you're comparing your circumstance to something that's not reality, and when we create
Right.
this false reality of like what it should be like, we're creating a disconnect, and with that disconnect, you're going to drive yourself crazy because it can never happen. It's kind of like setting a goal that can never be achieved. You're going to chase something that you can never get. So
And interesting because that like brings up, so there's like the main grief, there's the loss of the person, but then there's what's called secondary grief, and it's like when you realize the loss of expectation. Like about half of my friends are pregnant right now. They're all having like a second, a third, a fourth kid. Well, it's really easy for me to be like, well, if Keith were alive, I'd probably have a third kid by now,
yeah,
or we'd be talking about it. And so there's the loss of like, that's something I really wanted, but that choice was taken away from me. And so having to grieve the loss of the choice, or, going with my son to his first day of kindergarten and other dads being there, but his dad not being there, that's really hard. That's, the loss of something different. And so kind of as you go through life, and those won't end. I mean, there will be high school graduations, there will be weddings, there will be all sorts of things where it might not be this like incapacitating grief, but there's going to have to be a moment at each of those things where we say, oh, like this should be different.
yeah.
It's really terrible that this is not the way it should be.
Mm.
And then you can kind of take that deep breath and be like, okay, but this is where we are. And we want to still enjoy this memory and make memories together and not just kind of be stuck in the past or what could have been.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. And Becky, I really appreciate the courage of you sharing the story and being vulnerable and exposing yourself, and really going through this process is helping so many women who are going to deal with it. I mean, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I mean, you were unfortunately in your situation, it happened early in life, and I think there's a lot of gifts that you were able to find during this, which takes a lot of strength and moral courage, which is fantastic. And I just want to say on behalf of anyone who listens and reads your story, just we appreciate your courage and your ability to still write and pursue your passions and talk with other people and help them have a platform and a space for them to find their truth and find work for them. So if someone wanted to continue this conversation with you or seek counsel, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Well, the one thing I want everybody to know is that whatever your hard thing is, you get to choose how you handle it, right? Life doesn't happen at us. We get to choose how we respond. And I think that's been the biggest thing. Is like my tagline is choose brave, because we get to choose to be brave. Like it's not something that we're like, some people have the magical gift of being courageous and some people don't. Like we all have that choice. So you can find out more at beckylmccoy.com, and I'm on all the social medias at Becky L. McCoy. So I'm like ridiculously easy to find.
Excellent. Excellent. And we're really excited. You are the final interview.
Yeah.
So I'm done with my Facebook Live tour, which is great.
There you go.
So I guess to end on a bang, and this chapter 6 right here. So I'm their safe place, and it's very exciting. And we're going to be launching and releasing officially on Tuesday. So on Tuesday, November 21st, and I'll post the link for all the pre-orders. And as everyone knows, and just to make sure everyone does know, all proceeds 100% go to PB&J for USA. We have provided over 50,000 meals, and this Thanksgiving season, our goal is to reach over 10,000 meals just during this holiday season. It's growing exponentially with how
That's
people are getting involved, and especially with the book launch, with how many, what we can raise. So we're really excited to continue spreading the word, and doing kind of do our part in our local communities, and make some sandwiches and feed some people, and in the same time creating a space and a platform for awesome individuals like you to be able to share your story and inspire other people who just maybe just need to hear it at that point in life. So
Sure.
I really thank you, and we're going to be launching on Tuesday, so feel free to let everyone know.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to share your story with the world. So I will be posting your website on the post, so if anyone wants to get in contact with you, and if you want to post that meme, that would be great. And
yeah,
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this journey that you're on, and this blog, and sharing your story with the world. And I'm excited to see 10 years from now how much of an impact that you've taken these circumstances and turned them into such beautiful gifts. So very, very much a pleasure. So thank you for your courage.
All right. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.